This video is the elaboration likelihood model for explaining the persuasive effects of the media, and it's for the A-Level Psychology AQA-A specification for the June 2016 exams. If you're doing the 2017 or 18 resits, it's also applicable. So the elaboration likelihood model it's all about how likely a person is to elaborate on a message. And when you hear a message, so an advert, if you are going to elaborate on that in your own mind, then you're going to be more persuaded by that advert. So Petty and Cacioppo, 1981, suggest two different routes to persuasion. The first is called the central route, and the second is the peripheral route. So the central route is used if someone is actually motivated to elaborate on a particular message, then the central route is appropriate. So if the topic is of interest to them, that means they're going to want to think about the message, and it's probably something that is personal to them. So the central route provides complete information and requires elaboration and analysis of the message. So when you hear about the central route, you're thinking that this advert is going right to the centre of that person's thinking. It's something they're interested in, it's a topic that they want to know about, and therefore they're going to want to know lots of facts about it because it's something they're already interested in. They are then going to elaborate on that message themselves and analyse it in their own minds. And so that means it's the central route because it's something that is central to them. So the peripheral route is if someone is not motivated by the message. So whatever's being advertised, the person isn't really that bothered about it. If that's the case, then a peripheral route to persuasion is appropriate. Peripheral itself means if something's in the periphery, it means it's just something that's going on around you. You're not particularly aware of it, but things are happening in the periphery. So the audience is likely to focus on other factors other than the message, so catchy tunes and colours, celebrity endorsement, how attractive or credible the source is, and it requires limited analysis of the information. So the peripheral route, if you think about adverts, they're kind of all singing, all dancing. They don't really tell you much about the product, but they're relying on catchy gimmicks. So at the moment there's an advert for Ribena, and it's like a cartoon. There's a canal in the background and like massive rabbits like boinging around going doing, 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 doing. It's just complete nonsense. And that's because Ribena is just a drink, isn't it? And so they're relying on the peripheral route, so the colours, the theme of it, the fact that it might stick in your head to actually persuade someone. So the central route consists of thoughtful consideration of the arguments in the message. So you can see Barack Obama here, he's thinking deeply. The message is sent through this route must possess a high level of receiver involvement. So that means the receiver must care about the message. So they want to know about what's in that advert. The disadvantage is if the receiver doesn't have motivation to analyse the message, so if they're not directly affected by it and don't care about it, then they're not going to put the effort in to consider it, and so the message, the advert, is completely lost to many people. An advantage of the central route is that if it is something that you're interested in and elaborate on in your own mind, it's going to produce a longer lasting change. So the central route, a major advantage of it is that if you are persuaded by it, then you're going to be persuaded by it not just today and tomorrow and next week, but it is something that's going to stay with you and will actually influence your purchasing behaviour for probably years to come. So the disadvantage is if you're not interested in the topic, in the thing that's being advertised, then you're just going to forget about it. You're not even going to pay attention to it, so it's completely lost. But if you do care, then it's going to influence you for a long time. So the peripheral route of persuasion is successful for messages with low receiver involvement, low receiver motivation, and weak messages. So that means adverts for things where the receiver isn't bothered, the message about it, so is like for a chocolate bar or something. Look at the picture here. This advert was on a few years ago and it was for Mars bars, And so a Mars bar itself is a weak message. People aren't going to be really motivated to elaborate on a Mars bar in their mind, unless maybe they've got a chocolate addiction. It was a dog who was playing music and like creating a picture or something. It was just complete nonsense. And the slogan at the end was the guy sitting on the bench stood up, put his arm in the air with the Mars bar, and it just said winning. So why is it that a Mars bar would make you into a winner? It's just total nonsense. And so they're relying on the peripheral route, which is this like performing dog that's really cute, in order to sell their Mars bar. So if someone can't elaborate on a message extensively, they can still be persuaded by factors that have nothing to do with the actual content of the message. In this case, a really cute dog doing tricks. It makes the receiver think about something they are already familiar with and has positive thoughts about. So when you see a really cute dog doing a trick, it makes you feel good inside, and so that might then persuade you. However, the peripheral persuasion is not as strong nor as long-lasting as central persuasion. And I've put there why. And the reason being is that the message is weak. You kind of forget about it quite quickly. It doesn't resonate with you for long. And with things like with those Mars bar adverts, they're going to have to think of the next funny, entertaining, all singing, all dancing advert that will take your attention, because you don't think about it in your mind. If you think about the cognitive perspective, the more you think about something, the stronger it becomes and the more it influences your behavior. So in this case, you're not required to think deeply, and therefore it's not going to be as long lasting as the central route to persuasion. If you want to practice looking at adverts that have the central and peripheral route, then watch both of these adverts, and the link is in the description for them, and see if you can see which one is the central route and which one is the peripheral route, and try and work out the reasons why. You might also want to identify the adverts or health campaigns that use different routes to persuasion, just to help you clarify it in your mind. Another assumption of the elaboration likelihood model is that there are consistent individual differences in the need for cognition. So the need for cognition scale is something that you can complete. You can just Google it yourself if you want to try it. And what it means is, obviously, cognition means your thoughts. If you have a high need for cognition, it means that you're the type of person that really wants to think about things and analyze things. If you have a low need for cognition, then you're the type of person who doesn't need to think about things deeply. You're perhaps living life on a much more easy route than someone who has to think deeply about every single issue and topic in life. So the elaboration likelihood model says that the need for cognition actually has an impact on whether you would respond more to the central route or the peripheral route for persuasion. So if you are high in need for cognition, then the central route of persuasion is more appropriate. And if you're low in need for cognition, according to Petty and Cassiopo, then the peripheral route of persuasion is more appropriate for you. Applying the elaboration likelihood model to health campaigns was done by Vidrine et al. In 2007. And so they assessed the importance of the need for cognition in smokers. So need for cognition was measured using the need for cognition scale, and then participants were allocated to one of three conditions. They were either given a fact-based leaflet emphasising smoking risks, or an emotion-based leaflet emphasising smoking risks, or they were in a control condition. The people high in need for cognition responded better to the factual leaflet with all the facts and figures in it. The low need for cognition people responded better to the emotional leaflet, which is the peripheral route. So the fact-based leaflet had factual information that people could look at, analyse, read, elaborate on in their own mind. The emotion-based leaflet, again, would have caused people to elaborate in their own mind, but it wouldn't have been on all the facts, because that would have turned off the people with a low need for cognition. It would have been emotional stories, probably about people who had lost loved ones because of smoking. So they sort of elaborated on that message, but it was giving them like real life, easy, anecdotal information to digest, and so that was more persuasive. So this is evidence for the need for cognition because the ones high in need for cognition preferred facts, whereas the ones who were low in cognition were happy to rely on emotion-based information about how it affected people's lives. So applying the elaboration likelihood model was also done by Lin et al. In 2011, who did a study about online shopping. So they got 263 Taiwanese students to participate in an online shopping study, and they all had to buy a mobile phone based on consumer reviews. They all completed the need for cognition scale. So the high need for cognition people placed a greater importance on the quality of the reviews rather than the quantity. And the high quality reviews were objective and supported with facts, whereas the low quality reviews were subjective based on emotional reaction and quantity. So you know when you look at an online review and it says how many star rating it has based on consumer reviews, or it might say like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, and then it'll tell you how many people gave it 5, 4, 3, 2 or 1. Then for people with a peripheral route, that star rating is really important. The amount of people who have rated something is most persuasive, whereas people high in need for cognition, they want to actually read the reviews and read the specifics that people have written about because they are looking for the facts rather than just the figures. All the students were likely to buy a phone that had a large number of high quality reviews. So quantity is important in the central route, but it's not as important as it is to the peripheral route where people are low in the need for cognition. Evaluation of the elaboration likelihood model, the evaluation of the fact the peripheral route influence may only be temporary, comes from Penner and Fritz. I think that's how you pronounce it. So Penner and Fritz collected data on participants' willingness to help a person with the AIDS virus. And no university students volunteered when asked to help a person with AIDS to carry out a school project. But then Magic Johnson Jr., who's an incredibly famous basketball player, announced that he was HIV positive. And so Penner and Fritz repeated the study, and they found that 83% of students then volunteered to help the student who had AIDS. But 4.5 months later, this dropped back to 0%. So the peripheral route to persuasion can be strong, but is unlikely to last. And the reasons being is that the peripheral route often involves celebrities. So in this case, that was the celebrity that was surrounding this message. And so their influence is incredibly powerful, but it just doesn't last. That's one of the things that the peripheral route says. It's a weak message that is not long lasting. And it's because you're influenced at the time, but if you're the type of person who's just influenced by celebrity, then of course there are new celebrity issues that pop up all the time. People who are famous want to continue their fame, and so there'll always be stories in the media that replace very quickly what was in the media yesterday. And so you can see how powerful the message was. 83% of people suddenly volunteered to help the person with AIDS, which is a huge increase on 0%, which was what it was at the beginning. And then 4.5 months later, it went right back to 0%. So it's just this study by Penner and Fritz is really good evidence to show that the peripheral route is strong but only temporary. Fisk and Taylor evaluated why do people sometimes take the peripheral route, and they said that people are cognitive misers. So we know cognitive means you're thinking, that means your thoughts, how you think and process your thoughts. And a miser is someone who is really tight with their money. They don't want to spend any money at all. So a cognitive miser is someone who is very tight with their thoughts. They don't want to think hard. And Fisk and Taylor said that people are cognitive misers. They don't want to have to think really hard about things. And if you think about life, if you're watching this, you're probably a student. So you're constantly thinking about all your different A-level subjects or uni subjects. And you don't want to have to think hard when you're not in that environment. So if people are cognitive misers, then they rely on simple and time-efficient strategies when evaluating information and making decisions. So that means they just want to make a decision based on the smallest amount of information. They don't want to think hard. If the content of a message is not personally important, then people are more likely to be influenced by contextual cues like celebrity endorsement or the mood that is created. When the content is more important, they are better motivated to process the message more carefully, which is the central route. So we might be persuaded by Gary Lineker to eat crisps, but we would not be persuaded by him if he was endorsing mortgages. You know, a mortgage is something that you want to think really hard about and that is very important. Crisps is just kind of, you know, it's just crisps, isn't it? It's not that important. So with crisps, you're going to get the peripheral route will take precedence because it's just not important. So an opposing explanation for persuasion is social learning theory. And it says here, how does social learning theory and the elaboration likelihood model differ in their explanation of how to persuade people? So you'll know that social learning theory involves imitation, observation and imitation of significant role models. And you're more likely to be persuaded through social learning theory if the person in the advert is your role model, if you're motivated to comply with them. So that differs from elaboration likelihood model because social learning theory is pretty much what you see and observe, you then imitate the behaviour. It's also based on vicarious reinforcements. The examiners love to hear a bit of vicarious reinforcements, which you will know means a vicarious reinforcement is when you learn from other people's experiences. So if you see somebody rewarded for a behaviour, then you're going to more likely to repeat it, whereas if you see someone punished for it, you're less likely to repeat the behaviour. So in terms of advertising, if you've got Cheryl Cole, who is incredibly successful based on subjectively, I think, not her singing talent, but on, you know, how beautiful she is, her stage presence, the way that she speaks and communicates. A lot of people find that appealing, and so when she advertises hair products and she looks very, very beautiful and attractive, then and she's rewarded for that beauty by continuing her fame, then people are going to be more likely to be persuaded to buy that hair product. So social learning theory just looks at role models, but the elaboration likelihood model differs because it's not just what you see, you repeat. It's that what you see, you then cognitively elaborate on in your own mind. And it's that likelihood of elaboration which is going to cause you to be persuaded or not. So the evidence that you have for elaboration likelihood model are in this video, and you know, you can ponder on that yourself. It will help you to remember. But you can certainly bring in social learning theory as an opposing explanation. It's just simpler. It just says that when you watch your significant role models, especially if they're rewarded or punished, then you are going to be persuaded. And the elaboration likelihood relies on those internal processes of thinking hard and cognitively yourself elaborating on something. If you would like to practice using the elaboration likelihood model and indeed the Hovland-Yale model, which I'm hoping you'll already know about, then click on the link in the description to watch this advert for the Labour Party. And it was an advert when they wanted to win the May 2015 general election, which they spectacularly lost. So using all your knowledge from the elaboration likelihood model, watch the advert and identify all the reasons that it failed according to this model. If you would like to check your answers, then you can tweet me at blonde_pretzel. There'll be a link in the description for that too. And I'll send you an answer sheet if you request one, so you can check your answers. Here are some exam style questions. So if I was you, I would pause your video and take a screenshot or something so you've got these questions. and definitely practice them. Don't just look at them and think, I'll do that later, it'll be fine. Actually have a go at practicing them, because then when it comes to the exam, if something comes up that's similar, then you've already got the answer in your mind. You might sit here thinking, yep, it's easy, elaboration, likelihood, central route, peripheral route, central route's long lasting, and peripheral route doesn't last as long. It can be strong but doesn't last as long. That's great. I'm really glad that you've got that knowledge in your mind, but practice these questions, because if you want to get the higher grades, then practice is key, because otherwise you might just sit in the exam and think, you'll write the bare minimum and there'll be nothing there. If this model teaches you anything, it's that elaborating on something that you know about, it's persuasive, because it sticks in your mind. And so when you practice these questions, it's going to stick in your mind and be really easy peasy in the exam. So good luck. I hope it goes well. PSYA4 coming is it's a lovely paper, and I hope you will really enjoy it.